Hello, and welcome to 6 Degrees from Cannabis. I'm your host, Tori Rerick, PharmD and holistic healer. Each episode features a candid conversation about how connecting with the cannabis plant has enhanced an individual's wellness journey. Here to honor the plant, talk about healing, and have fun. Today's episode is about achieving satisfaction with pleasure through cannabis. Our guest, Ashley Manta, describes herself as another child of dare culture who originally feared the cannabis plant before experiencing enhanced sensuality and the ability to have penetrative sex without pain thanks to cannabis lubricant. Stick around for a conversation about incorporating cannabis as an ally for sex magic rituals, what Ashley looks for in a cannabis lube, and her answer to the question, what is the best strain for sex? Let's go to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Tonight we have on Ashley Manta, who is an award-winning sex educator and coach, who has become a sought-after authority on mindfully combining sex and cannabis as part of her CannaSexual brand. She is the author of the CBD solution, Sex, published in 2020 in conjunction with Mary Jane and the Chronicle books. She writes for Playboy as a Playboy advisor. She completed her certification as a body sex facilitator after studying with the legendary pleasure pioneer Betty Dodson. She facilitates retreats and workshops at resorts and festivals around the world. She is a brand ambassador for Sibian and Foria. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is so great. Let's break the ice tonight by selecting a card from the Follow Your Heart Oracle deck. I created this deck with cannabis in mind. It's 420 friendly and highly inspired. And so I'd love your take on connecting the message of satisfaction with cannabis.
What a beautiful card to pull. I would say satisfaction is really one of the many gifts of cannabis, is feeling more satisfied with your body, with your pleasure, with your comfort, with your mindset, is getting you to a place of really feeling that deep sense of satisfaction. So I couldn't imagine a more appropriate card to pull.
Totally. That's interesting. Of course, this is what you do. So you brought it right away. But just with what you mentioned, there are so many aspects to sex that I didn't consider, and especially feeling comfortable in those aspects. So I'm sure we'll get into it now. I'm wondering what your original perception of cannabis was, and has it shifted?
My original perception of cannabis stemmed directly from being a child of dare culture in the 90s. I believed that all drugs were bad. Cannabis was as bad as heroin, and people who did drugs were bad. So clearly we've come a long way from there.
Yeah.
But I really didn't start to unlearn that really biased belief system until college, when I was actually able to meet people who used cannabis, who were in my graduate school program in philosophy. People with PhDs, people who were finishing up their master's degrees, people who had full-time jobs and enjoyed cannabis and found that it was really beneficial to them. One of the people in my cohort wrote his entire master's thesis very high. And wow. That was sort of the moment for me where I was like, oh, this is not what they told me. And I had my first intentional cannabis consumption experience around that time. And I was amazed at all of the ways in which it helped me feel light and happy and giddy, and my body felt fantastic. It was really a game changer for me.
Amazing. And so can you elaborate on how the plant serves you?
The plant really has served me in so many ways. I find that when I am using cannabis intentionally, it enhances every aspect of my sensuality, from the way that touch feels to the ways that things smell better, things taste better. I can appreciate colors and feeling that they're more vivid. and feeling someone against my skin, or even just feeling the fabric that I'm laying on, is just so potent. And that makes me feel really present and grounded as a result. So that serves me in a lot of really important ways as someone with PTSD, with anxiety, who has struggles sometimes feeling embodied. Cannabis really serves me in that way.
And so how did you get to that point where you were discovering the beautiful pair that cannabis and sex are?
It really started back in around 2014. For my entire adult life, I had experienced pain with penetration, and I could not find a single doctor who could tell me something useful that actually worked for me. And back in 2014, I found this company called Foria that was making a THC-infused topical oil for the vulva. And this intrigued me. I'm like, okay, I never heard of putting weed on your pussy. That's kind of a cool concept. And I did. I used it. I waited the 25 minutes as suggested. And that was the first time I was able to have penetrative sex without pain. And it blew my mind because as a sexuality professional since 2007, I didn't know anyone who was talking about sex and cannabis. And so to have it be this like really specific thing that I know so many people with vulvas struggle with, I was like, oh my gosh, this needs to be a thing. And started talking about it and haven't stopped since.
Wow, that's incredible. So with the sex education, did you follow this path because of your own challenges around, penetration, for example? Or what led you into that path?
Yeah, great question. I actually came into sex education from a sexual violence prevention perspective. So it was sort of adjacent to that. It was me noticing my own trauma and thinking to myself, I don't want this to happen to someone else. How can I help prevent that? And my answer was, okay, I can tell my story, which is empowering for me. And it also allows me an opportunity to speak to college students and high school students. And I even did about a year working with the Crime Victim Center of Chester County, where I would go out to like K through 12 school age students and talk to them about boundaries and consent, and that no one gets to touch their body without their permission, and that they are totally sovereign and autonomous in their body, and they don't owe anyone anything for any reason. And that was really powerful work. I became the sexual and relationship violence prevention coordinator for my campus when I was in grad school. And that work started to kind of put me on the path of like, okay, I want to help people. I want to do sex ed. I want to like not just talk about the scary parts or the traumatic parts of sex, but also the pleasurable, fun, awesome parts of sex. And so I started teaching blowjob classes and about sex toys and lube and all of that good stuff. And so this has really been kind of the culmination of all of those things combined.
Wow. Okay. So how do you serve the plant? How do you give back?
I try to serve the plant by really preaching mindfulness and intentionality. So I buy product from women and BIPOC owned companies. I sit with the plant when I receive it and I offer gratitude. I think about all of the people who are in jail, all of the farmers, all of the manufacturers, all of what it took to get this to me, and that it is such a privilege to be able to have access to it. And then I put my money where my mouth is. I donate to places like Last Prisoner Project. I support BIPOC-owned businesses in the community. Like, I really want to make sure that, especially as a white woman, like I am paying attention and listening and really being in service to the plant and to the people who have had the plant used against them by the government that is so fucking racist, and making sure that like I'm using my platform for good.
Of course. And so is that something that you weave into your workshops and retreats?
Definitely. I open everything I teach I will talk about the war on drugs and all of the ways in which racism has informed the drug policies in this country. And I encourage people to like go out and vote and go out and donate and volunteer your time and like, don't just smoke it, do something.
Yeah, because it's like if you're getting into sex, like you're going to bring it all, right? Like people are in this open, receptive state, hopefully, if they're coming to your classes. And that's just a time to call in all the parts of us because everything is connected. And so maybe that's kind of an interesting concept because I think some of the trouble that I've personally had with sex outside of cannabis is my inability to like sink in and bring in all those parts of me because of compartmentalizing due to trauma and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So it's interesting to be able to like get into that space where things are open and then get more comfortable talking about what has led you to that point. Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay, so talk about, please, the book, The CBD Solution and Sex. Like, what were the main points that you needed to bring out in that?
That book was such a labor of love. I had an amazing time writing it, and it was really meant to be a primer for people who were new to either cannabis or being intentional about sex and pleasure as an adult. And so the first chapter is just kind of the science of CBD and THC and the endocannabinoid system. The second chapter is really just laying out all the things that they didn't teach you in school about sex, pleasure-based anatomy, lube and condom compatibility, toy compatibility, just like consent and how to negotiate and how to own your desires and be very clear about what you want and don't want. And then I go into chapter 3 is solo sex, which I think is really the foundation of our sexuality, is the relationship we have with ourselves and our bodies and our pleasure, so that you can figure out what is it that you like? How do you want to be touched? How, what turns you on, so that you can articulate that when you happen to be in partnered space. Fourth chapter is all about partnered space and different things that you can do together and really thinking outside the box beyond just penetrative sex into let's, instead of considering foreplay as everything from kissing to oral, excluding penetration, and instead think of sex as anything that you do for the purpose of pleasure, and foreplay is everything you do to prepare for that.
Wow. That's a thought piece in itself.
Right?
That is so cool. Okay.
Thank you.
What is the most frequently asked question you get in relation to cannabis? And what's your answer?
Great question. The most common question I get, especially from media, but also from people out in the world, is what is the best strain for sex? And when I hear that question, I smile, because there is no best strain for sex. As you know, and hopefully your listeners know, or if they don't, now you know, cannabis is a fully subjective experience. You can take the same cultivar, hand it to 4 different people, and you will get 4 different results. It really depends on how your body individually reacts to the cannabinoid content and the terpenes and what your metabolism is like and what your tolerance is like, and also the context, your set and setting. Just like with psychedelics, if you're at a rock concert, you're probably gonna have a different reaction than if you're, having an intimate night at home with just like soft music playing and low lighting. You can steer that. And I hear people all the time talking about like, oh, sativas are like buzzy and they're for like energetic sex, and indicas are like sleepy, so they're more for like slow, passionate sex. And I'm like, nope. No. Indica sativa is bullshit. They're totally marketing terms at this point. It doesn't actually mean anything on a scientific level. There is no using leaf morphology to predict with any kind of accuracy what the results or effects of a given cultivar will be. And so, that's leftover shorthand from the illegal markets, where a dealer would smoke a little bit and be like, well, this made me buzzy, I'm going to call it a sativa, and this made me sleepy, so I'm going to call it an indica, so that we were all sort of using the same language. But at this point, it means nothing. I've had quote unquote sativas that put me to sleep and vice versa. So it's really like, I encourage folks, instead of trying to figure out what the best strain is, you've got to be a pioneer and explorer of your own pleasure. You need to go try little bits of things, and just a little bit, just a couple of puffs, or, 2 to 5 milligrams of an edible or tincture, and just notice what happens in your body and masturbate. And then you will have very concrete evidence as to how this affects you sexually. And you can write it down in a little book. And then when it's sexy times, you go, okay, I noticed that when I was anxious, this helped me get present. When I was tired, this gave me a little boost. When I was not feeling particularly connected to my body, this made me feel more sensations.
The subjectivity is one of my favorite things about cannabis. And I think that's one of the things that scares people the most, especially like coming from the pharmacy background. People so much want to be told, do this and you will expect this and don't change anything until I tell you to. But like both with cannabis and sex, like that's where you get to be creative, be open, try things.
Yeah, you really do have to put in the legwork, but it's worth it. You know, we think that we want the magic pill. We think that we want everything to come easily, but that's so boring. Like half of the fun is figuring out what works for you. I just had the most spectacular first date last night. And like, we spent 45 minutes just talking before any clothes came off of like, what do you like? What do I like? What are your boundaries? Like, what are some things that you really enjoy doing with a partner? What are some things you prefer to do on your own? What kind of lube do you like? What kind of condoms do you use? And like, the more we talked, the more excited we got.
The foreplay came through.
Exactly.
Okay. A couple more questions about products. So what do you look for in a cannabis lube?
I look for, first and foremost, I would prefer it to be a women or BIPOC owned company. That's like out of the gate. Barring that, if that's not available in my area or what have you, the next thing I'm looking for is full or broad spectrum extract. I don't fuck with isolates. I find them to be kind of useless. You need the whole plant. And basically full spectrum is the entire thing. Broad spectrum is the entire thing minus THC. You typically see that in CBD oil that are able to be shipped across state lines. And I'm also looking for really minimal ingredients. I don't want a laundry list of chemicals in my pussy. I really just want cannabinoids and the carrier oil, maybe some essential oils if I happen to enjoy sensations. So something like a ginger or a cinnamon to give some heat, or a peppermint to make it a little cooler. That could be cool. But like, I see some of these brands out there, especially like the more mainstream CBD brands that are putting in like capsaicin and like really yucky chemicals like sodium benzoate. Yeah. It's like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, I don't want any of that shit in my pussy. So I'm a bit of a purist. I tend to like oil-based, because it's harder to fuck up oil-based. Water-based is very easy to fuck up. You put in glycerin, parabens, propylene glycol, like you're just asking for a yeast infection. And the only downside to oil, of course, is that it is not compatible with latex or a lot of barriers, in fact. Nitrile and polyurethane are the only two barriers that are really good with oil. Otherwise,
I'm literally taking notes. Okay.
Cool. I hope other people are too. It's all in my book. I lay all this out.
Oh, good. I don't even need to take notes. Okay. I'll put the pen down. So for rituals, of course, we just mentioned like experiment, get used to whatever you want to do. But what's a good starting point for people with ritual and cannabis and sex?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. So I am a witch. I practice sex magic, and I use cannabis as one of my primary allies in the work that I do. So what that looks like is I'm going to offer gratitude to the plant. I'm going to set my intention of how I want to work with the plant to create the experience and also the results that I'm looking for. So not just like pleasure in the moment, but like, am I trying to manifest ideal clients or more travel or a spectacular lover that fucks me for hours, whatever. Shoot for the moon. So then I will smoke or vape a little bit, hold it, and then exhale it with maybe some sound. And as that's starting to hit me, I will be lighting candles. I might light some incense. I will change the lighting structure overhead so that it's like a blue or a red light. I'll put on some music, and I'll really start to get into my body and touch very deliberately and undress slowly in ways that feel yummy and sexy to me. And then I will start to explore my body really with curiosity and a sense of adventure and discovery. Who is my body today? What is she like today? And as I start to find those spots where I'm like, ooh, this is a place I'd like to linger, feeling into that, feeling the heart opening, feeling the energy move through my body and starting to like feel the pleasure build. And as I reach that climax, shooting that intention that I originally set out into the universe and vocalizing heavily, making lots of like, oh, yes, I am worthy, you know, like as you're coming, it'll change the whole game for you.
Completely. Oh my gosh. I feel like, okay, I'm 29. I've been in a relationship for close to 10 years. I've had 2 children, and I feel like I'm finally understanding like what it is to fuck the universe and like feel myself, like show up for myself in a sexual way. I'm only at the tip of the iceberg, but it's incredible so far.
I'm so excited for you. It is a magical carpet ride. I cannot get enough of it.
Yes, this sex magic. I'm like, what have I been? And it's a lot of like fighting in my head of like, you know, something will pop in from like Christian upbringing or just society. And I'm like, no, they want that to be there. I'm like, break barriers. I'm going to go harder into this, like go deeper. It's really incredible.
It's so powerful. It's actually why I created this online intensive that I do called Activating Your Cosmic Pussy. Ooh. And it's a group for people with vulvas who are comfortable being referred to as sisters or goddesses. And it's 7 weeks of connecting with one another, really unlearning all of the societal shame and family of origin shame that we've been given about our bodies and our pleasure and our desires. One really incredible transformative exercise we do is a vulva gazing experience where each person takes their turn and shows off their vulva to the rest of the group in a really non-sexual way, just in a celebratory, affirming way where people you're not trying to sleep with and also people who are not examining you for some medical reason are looking at your pussy and telling you how amazing and beautiful you are.
That's important. That's so important. I think we as like a collective and those of us who are tuned in and like, you know, being intentional with our lives are getting to this point of really practicing who we want to be in these safe spaces. So I love that you've created that.
It's been such an incredibly powerful group that I've been running. I'm now in open enrollment for my 3rd group, which will be starting up in August. And the first 2 groups, they've stayed close with one another. Like it's really become a sisterhood where they're supportive of one another. They go on vacations together. Wow. And a lot of them came in feeling like they were the misfit in their lives. They didn't know anyone else who smoked weed. They didn't know anyone else who was curious about sex. And they felt kind of like the outcasts. And they found this beautiful community with each other. And I'm just like overjoyed at how it's gone.
Amazing. I have 2 more questions. One about who you receive your wisdom from, who are like, well, I guess this is kind of getting into the last question, but I want to specifically know about Isis and her sex magic and if you have anything to offer on that.
Oh my God. Isis is such a supreme being, queen. I have done some really incredible work with her and in partnership with her have manifested some really incredible fucking things. I think it's really worth diving into all of her mythology and all of the stories about her and really working with her as a guide and a teacher through meditation, through devotion, and see what happens. It's pretty incredible.
Cool. And then back to, you were explaining the ritual and you mentioned something so important, which is voice and sound. Yes. So can you share a bit about the connectivity with the heart space and the throat chakra and sexuality?
Sure. So I can pretty much guarantee that anyone listening to this will identify when I say that I grew up masturbating in stealth mode. Silently and quickly. I didn't want to get caught. I didn't want someone to walk in on me. I was so paranoid. I did not make a peep. I could get myself off in lightning speed with no noise whatsoever. So I socialized myself. I taught myself how to experience pleasure silently. And that was my default mode. It took very intentional unlearning of unlocking that throat chakra, being able to speak my truth out in the world, but also being able to use my voice in the bedroom, whether I'm by myself or with a partner. And where that really, the kind of the seed of that started with starting to moan when I masturbate and the ways in which that connects, you know, that vocalizing, you can do chakra specific vocalizations. You can do, you know, from root to crown, different, those seed sounds of, la, lum, vum, rum, all of those up the chakra train, and also just making any kind of pleasure noise is going to start to unlock and shift things, because that vocalization makes energy move. And as the energy moves, so move the blocks. And it's so spectacular.
I just had like a whole series of reactions that no one could see, but trust me, I'm like over here doing the things and affirming everything you're saying. Thank you for that.
Oh my God, my pleasure.
So let's talk about resources. You have your own, and there are some that you recommend. I want to hear your books, podcasts, groups, websites. Let's talk about it.
So for the external resources that I really love, first and foremost, which I didn't even send in the email I sent you, but I can't believe, she's always at the top of my mind, is Lizzie Jeff, who is a rap priestess and medicine woman whose music has healed my soul on so many different levels. A lot of her songs are on my sexy playlist, along with one of her close colleagues, Astamari and Moonflower. They all have just this divine, inspired fucking powerhouse music, and the events that they curate together. Lizzie's just, she's a goddess. She's a goddess embodied. And I'm so grateful to be on this planet and get to know her. Like to be sitting in an apartment that she decorated. Like it's so wild to me. I'm very grateful. So for the love of gods and goddesses, support Lizzie Jeff and anyone that she works with, because she is spectacular. Also the Last Prisoner Project, which is a really great organization that helps folks who have been incarcerated for cannabis. The Glowing Goddess Getaway is one of my favorite women's retreats that I go to. It's largely in California, but they do branch out as well. And they have Instagram lives almost every day, sister sessions on Sundays. And I will actually be teaching at the SoCal Getaway in September and at the Couples Getaway in October that are both going to be in Joshua Tree. So definitely check them out. Women Grow is the place where I got started, arguably, that got me into the cannabis industry. I applied for a Women Grow scholarship to go to the Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo in 2015. And so that was like the door that opened. And those folks have been so amazing and supportive. It is fantastic to be around other entrepreneurial women who are really there for each other. And then Supernova Women is specifically for BIPOC women in cannabis. And so that's a great resource for finding facilitators and business folks that you can support.
Thank you. And where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on my website, CannaSexual.com, which is definitely like the portal to all the other things I do. CannaSexual on Instagram. My podcast is called Elevated Intimacy, and that's available on Apple and Spotify, as well as pretty much every other podcast streaming network. My virtual 7-week Sex Magic intensive, which starts in August, is available for enrollment right now at activatesexmagic.com. And if you are curious about Foria and want to try their CBD stuff, it's foriawellness.com, coupon code CannaSexual20, and you will save 20%.
Thank you. That's amazing. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to leave with the listeners, Ashley?
Well, if you're listening to this before July 21st, it is International Handjob Day. And that is something that transcends any genital configuration. It's not just for penises. If you are touching genitals, I consider that a hand job. Hey. And it is my way of encouraging folks to really, again, think outside of penetration and really look at a holistic approach to pleasure. And so if you're curious about that, check out elevatedintimacy.com and you'll see my online course all about hand sex.
Very cool. Thank you so much for your time. I know the listeners are going to love this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for tuning in to 6 Degrees from Cannabis. If you connected with this episode, please share it with a friend who would benefit from hearing it too. Tap the subscribe button to be notified when the next 6 Degrees episode is released. You can find more information about holistic healing, the Follow Your Heart Oracle deck, and what I do by visiting ToriRerick.com. If you message us on Instagram at 6 Degrees from Cannabis, we'll be sure to message you back. Bliss be with you.